Let's do some fan questions.
Hey, Uncle Chael, what's up?
Hey man, we're just two medical students in Karachi, Pakistan. Much love your way, man. One quick question about Zabit.
Yeah, is he the Jon Jones of 145, bro?
And also, do you think he has the stamina to take Max Holloway the full 5 rounds? Much love, my friend. Take care.
Good luck in your studies, guys. I have to tell you, you're not the first to bring up this conditioning issue with Zabit, but I don't see it. I've heard some other people question whether he can go 5 rounds. I just saw him go 5 rounds. That's what his last fight was. I thought he held up fine. I think there wasn't enough credit given to his opponent, who was a very game, opposition for him. But I didn't see any problems there with Zabit. I mean, I just didn't see him. I didn't see him fading and dragging. That's just not what I saw. But other eyes did see that. So let's acknowledge it could be a real thing. Look, Max's condition is another level. I do understand that. But yes, I think that conditioning-wise, Zabit can hold up. Now, you asked another question, which was, is he the Jon Jones of 145 pounds? I interpret that in twofold. First off, is he dynamic and creative and unpredictable? All compliments which you would have to give at least a younger Jon Jones. Yes, yes, and yes. Is he as dominant of a fighter? Well, again, if you just go back to his last contest, which was a little bit of give and take, no, he's probably not quite where Jon is. But he does have a very good understanding of what he's good at. He does have a very real understanding that I am taller and longer than my opponent, so I don't need to get inside. I need to stay outside and keep them guessing. He does some things very well, and I think much like Jon, he should be given a moment to mature and build. He hadn't lost in the UFC. He's finishing opponents. And much like when Khabib had a close fight with Al, so many people began to question Khabib instead of give credit to Al. I feel like, Zabit's going through a little bit of that. His opponent brought him a good fight. Good for him, not bad for Zabit.
Hey, Chael, Shane again. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on the whole Masvidal being too big for Conor McGregor nonsense? Because Masvidal's 5'10", Conor's 5'9", and they've both fought at lightweight and welterweight. And I think that'd be a great explosive fight. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they are definitely close. I mean, look, in fairness to Conor McGregor, he was a 145-pounder that had a hard time making it, moved up to 55, and 170 pounds was quite a gutsy move. I mean, it really was. It was a very gutsy move. I hear what you're saying, that he and George on fight night are probably going to be similar in size, but they would be separate. I mean, similar in size and separated by 12 to 15 pounds. How do you want to look at that? You want to call that similar? Or you want to call that separated by 12 to 15 pounds? And it would favor Masvidal. And I can just tell you, regardless of what the scale says, if you stand with both of those athletes, George is meaningfully bigger. He just is. Broader shoulders. I realize you said there's only 1 inch that separates them, but it feels like 2 to 3 inches. That also extends to a reach. And it's a very big deal. George doesn't really get credited for being this big power striker, but I don't know how he doesn't. If you go back and just simply look at his record, don't even have to watch the fights, just go look at his records. He's put plenty of guys down. He is a power striker. He's just also so good with the precision, people tend to just lean that he's a precise striker as opposed to a power. The point that I'm trying to make is at that weight, that is a very real thing. Now, if you're a Conor supporter and you want to come out and say, so what, Conor doesn't care, he deal with it, fine. Go right on ahead. I got no problem with it. I'll stop what I'm doing and watch those two guys fight. But that wasn't the question you asked. You asked, is that a real thing where Conor should be able to fight guys that weigh what he weighs? I happen to think yes.
Hey, Chael, it's your boy Matt here. Love the show, love everything you do. I'm a big fan. I want to know what you think about extending the rest period between rounds to, 2 minutes. I think you'll see a lot more action, as the fighters wouldn't have to worry about cardio so much, and it would be great, especially for 5-round main event fights.
Okay, so Matt, that's a hypothetical that you and I aren't actually advocating for because we actually believe that we have a chance of getting that done. But I will at least concede to your point. If your point is if you give guys more rest, they can go out and and push harder and do more. Yeah, of course you're right on that. I like the idea of shortening the rounds myself. I like, boxing does 3-minute rounds. That might be a little bit quick for MMA with some of the grappling positions, but it does seem like we could maybe settle on 4 minutes. It seems like the arbitrary 5 minutes that was picked might be something that needs revisited, particularly just with the skills of the athletes as they continue to improve. If you're just to follow the history of the sport and you look back at the tournament format where it was 3 or 4 fights in one night, they had to do away with that just because the athletes got better. The damage that you would take in fight number 1 and fight number 2 was so much greater than it was before guys were training and adapting and learning multiple skills. They had to do away with it completely. Not only can you not do 3 fights in one night or 4 fights in one night, now it's 1 fight in one night. And guys then need 3 months after that before they could go back and do it again. 4 and 5 months before they could do it again. So I think we have proven that revisiting some of the duration and length due to the acceleration in athlete is a very real thing. Now, where does that stop? Where do we draw the line? Look, we're not going to get anywhere with 2-minute rest. I don't think you're advocating for it, and neither am I. But I think if we're just two guys talking, sure, you make a fair point. They did that in an organization in Japan called Pride. Pride would go a 10-minute round and then 2 5-minute rounds. Really goofy, but either way, in between those rounds, you had 2 minutes of rest. The action was great. The fights were good. The fans didn't even notice. Most fans didn't even know that was a thing. Some of you that followed Pride maybe didn't even know until I just said that right now. Oh, that's right. They were doing 2 minutes of rest. So that's a real thing, and you can balance it how you want. Amateur wrestling does 30 seconds. I'm trying to think what amateur boxing does. I mean, you could do what you want with those rest periods, whether you want to push the guys or you want to rest the guys. That between you and I, sure, that's a real thing.
Hey, sup, Chael? It's Lazy Marari from YouTube. My question is, since Jorge Masvidal dominated Nate Diaz, do you think if Nick Diaz fights with Jorge Masvidal, do you think Jorge will dominate the fight same as he dominated Nate, or there will be some difference in the fight, like balanced fight, or Nick Diaz will be a lot stronger than Nate in fight with Masvidal? What do you think?
Yeah, I think you have a different fight. And that's one of those things where we can all go back and forth and debate. But I mean, come on, that's what you do before a fight. Yes, I do think that you would have a different fight, and maybe not for the same reasons that you think. Like, let me offer you an example. Maybe not because of the punching or the pacing or the kicking of Nick Diaz, or even the just natural size of Nick Diaz. Maybe not because of any of that. I think you'd have a different fight because now you have a training partner. Forget that it's this is your training partner, has been in there with him. Not to mention Nick, who was an integral part of that camp and preparation and walking out with Nate to the weigh-ins and such, was there to support him. Nick studied Masvidal. Now, we're not talking about leaps and bounds of a, heads up that this is going to be, but it would matter. It would at least be something in Nick's direction. Being familiar with the guy, seeing a guy, working with your brother, what were the problems? What was he doing to disguise stuff? How was he landing some of those body shots? What was his footwork like? I mean, those are real things that you could bring to the table. So if you're asking me if it would be a meaningfully different fight, I mean, look, Nate and Nick fight really similar. And then if you want to discuss who's better with the hands or the feet or the grapple, but they have a very similar approach, very similar styles. They love to be on their back. They love to be busy on their back. They love to look for submissions. When they're on the feet, they like to come forward. I mean, there's a lot of things where these guys are very similar. They're both trained by Coach Perez. I mean, they got a little bit more similarity. I do think that Nick is just a naturally bigger guy. Nate used to be a 155-pounder. Nick has done work as high as 185 pounds. I think just a naturally a bigger guy could matter, particularly if it comes to grappling or if it comes to absorbing some of those shots. So without getting the X's and O's as to completely why, just to answer your question, yes, I think you'd see a different match.
What's going on, Chael? I only have one question for you. So Logan Paul just recently fought KSI for the second time. Now, there are talks of him wanting to come to the UFC or maybe Bellator. Now, we've already seen what happens whenever someone comes into the sport like the UFC and they train and they just don't do so good and they really don't look like they have any business being in the sport. We've already seen that with CM Punk. Now, Logan's excuse is that he is a state wrestler with a wrestling background. Well, I also have a lifelong wrestling background, and I'm just curious on what your take is on thinking about YouTubers possibly trying to get a shot into the UFC. What do you think someone like Logan Paul needs to do to prove that he deserves to be in a sport like this?
All right, look, Logan Paul is not the scumbag that a lot of people think he is. He's truly not. I mean, the guy does work hard. I've seen his training videos in the gym. You guys have seen him fight, and you can make your own assessment of where he's at as a fighter. But we do need to give to him physically. He came in shape. If you go watch the contest in itself, he did not fade. He was a competitor who was trying to win. Stop there, but in fairness, he at least does deserve that level of credit. He also did an interview where I thought he was very honest in it. He said, look, I want to go fight in the UFC. I want to fight in Bellator. And they said, well, who do you want to fight? He said, well, give me a worthy opponent. Now, that sounds like he's about to be an arrogant prick, right? But then he finished that up when he said a worthy opponent. He said, don't give me a world-class fighter because I'm not a world-class fighter. Give me somebody equal to me that's just hungry and young and willing to work and willing to go for it when the bell rings. And there was a part of me, man, I can sign off on that. And I understand that you guys that are Bellator fans and UFC fans, you want those spots to go to the right guys. I do get that. And I'm not even advocating that he get one of them. But if he were to, he does have a seat at the table. I mean, I can remember when James Toney came in and people were pissed off. But look, James had an argument to come in and he brought a big fan base. He also brought a lot of combat with him. If he's willing to suck it up and walk out there, in fairness, great. Bring your fans with you. We're going to try to keep as many of them as you can. CM Punk similar. Look, you want to know who else had a similar, guys, but you guys are forgetting it? A guy named Brock Lesnar. Brock hadn't done a damn thing since 2001 while he was at the University of Minnesota. I mean, in fairness, he also came in with this big wrestling background, but he was willing to dig deep. We knew he was a competitor. We knew he'd show up in shape. We knew when the bell rang, he'd go after the other guy, and he brought a whole bunch of eyeballs. I don't see as big of a problem with bringing someone who's a star. And I get you got to do one-offs. This isn't celebrity boxing. I get it. But every now and then, to have an introduction of somebody who maybe gets a tip of the hat because of another reason, such as just being a famous guy that's got a whole bunch of fans. Now, I can tell you guys until I'm blue in the face, I beg you to understand this concept. I don't really mean to you guys, but a lot of younger fighters, I'll beg them to understand the concept. They'll look at me and nod yes and have no idea what I'm talking about. But promotion is about storytelling. And if you ever challenge that, or even if you don't like it, my case is still proven. As recently as 10 days ago, when Logan Paul fought KSI and DAZN reported, wouldn't say the number that they did, but they reported those two did a bigger number than Canelo, who had fought 1 week before. So as far as evidence that storytelling is what this is all about, and Logan's a damn good storyteller, like it or don't. But if you're asking me if he's got a seat at the table, I will tell you, maybe not, but he's at least got the chair pulled out.
Hey, Uncle Chael, much love from Canada, eh? I just wanted to know, you fought at 185, 205, and heavyweight. What would you want to do if you could fight at a lower weight class? Let's say you could fight at anywhere from 125 to 170. Who would be your dream matchup and why?
Oh, down to 170. I'll tell you, I never had a goal to go lower. I really didn't. I was one of the guys, for right or wrong, that bought into the concept that within the sport of fighting, bigger is better. Go as heavy as you can go. When I was fighting at 185, I never wanted to fight at 185. What had happened is I had a debut fight against Babalu at 205 pounds, and I took it on short notice, and that's where the opportunity was. And when it was time to weigh in, I had all of my clothes on, including my shoes, and I weighed 202 pounds. And I remember Dana looking at me. The hell's going on here? This guy's underweight, fully dressed. We're moving him down to 185. And that's all that happened. After the Babalu fight, I got a phone call. Hey, you got another fight. It's coming up against Trevor Prangley, and we're putting it at 185. And then I was stuck at 185. And that was in like the year 2006. I ended up leaving the UFC. I had a tour through Bodog and the WEC, but for some reason I was just the 185 pounder. That's just the way it was. And then over time, right, I was like any other human being. You don't get smaller with time. You get a little bit bigger with time. Then the testosterone era comes around. I'm the face of the testosterone. You're taking testosterone while trying to lose weight. It just becomes a really hard thing. Okay, let me move up to 205. comfortable, and then an opportunity came for heavyweight. But the only reason I say that for you is I never really had a vision to go down to 170. I've never been asked that until you just asked me, unless I would need a minute to even look at the landscape. I've never had heat or a problem with a guy that was smaller than me. It just never happened that way. So I couldn't even tell you a guy that I think's a jerk and I'd like to, grab him by the collar and pull him aside. I got no heat with anybody that was small. That's just the way that it was. So I'm having a hard time with the question, but I appreciate it.
Hey, Chael. Sean here from New Jersey. So, my question really is, what happens if Kobe Covington wins? Throughout his career, especially on the UFC, when he became big name, everybody that he fights is like, everybody's like, oh, this is the next guy to beat him. This is the next guy to beat Kobe. And then now he's fighting Kamaru, everybody's saying, oh, this is the guy that's going to, quiet him down, shut him up. This is the guy who's going to beat him. So what happens if Usman can't beat him? I'll probably catch crap for this, but I'm a huge Kobe Covington fan. And, he's been saying he's defending his title. He's been defending his title this whole time. If it becomes true that he was defending his title the whole time, what's next?
Yeah, going to be pretty hard to deny him at that point, right? You said you're a Colby fan, but let's say you're not. Let's look at it from the other side of the tracks. You got one great hope left out there. It's Kamaru Usman. If Kamaru can't stop him, who can? I'm with you. Who can? I mean, for the most part, they're in the rear view. Now, as long as Colby doesn't believe that, as long as he was to use this for a springboard, get right back in the gym, put his head down, not believe all the headlines and get lost in some of it, as we see many people do. But if he stayed focused and keeps working and keeps getting better, I do concede to your point that some of his more heavy lifting is behind him. I didn't know how good Kamaru Usman was until the night he fought Woodley. And I knew he was damn good. I want to say he was 15-1 going into that fight. Just beat RDA, right? A former world champion, dominant fashion. Might have even won all 5 rounds. I watched the fight, might have even won every round. I still didn't know he was that good. I mean, this guy was really something impressive, particularly with his cardio, particularly with his wrestling, which was something that Tyron Woodley pointed out and goes, listen, this guy did very well, but he did it in the Division II. That was a fair point by Tyron Woodley. I was a wrestler. These guys were wrestlers. That is how it is looked at. Kamaru had a different opinion. Kamaru had more of like the Shane Carwin type opinion that said, I don't give a damn about any of that. Bring it on. I mean, he just did. And he looked amazing. And I think that's what you're conceding to, that Kamaru is an incredible fighter. And if Colby beats him, who's better than Kamaru? So at least by that logic, who could beat Colby? It'd be very hard to say. I mean, I do think matchup-wise that Masvidal is sitting there with something special. Masvidal's manager came out. On a different note, let me tell you this. Masvidal's manager, Dan Lambert, came out earlier today. He said, I'd rather see George take a super fight than take a title fight. Now, I was happy to hear that because I've been preaching that over here to anybody that's willing to listen. George Masvidal is in this very unique, Nate Diaz-esque, Conor McGregor-esque, Nick Diaz-esque spot that whatever he does next is going to be a big deal. And there's not many other fighters you could say that about. Most fighters either got to be fighting for the championship or they got to be in an elimination fight. Then every now and then, I just named the 4 that exist in existence. And do you even want to, you might have to take Nick out of that because we don't know if Nick's licensed and serious about this and moving forward. You might just be down to 3 with Nate, George, and Conor that can go out there and do whatever they want. And they're going to sell out an arena, whether a belt is up or not. I mean, it's a very special place. And I agree with Dan Lambert. Now that title is something special. It needs to be considered. But a super fight in this unique unicorn of a spot that Masvidal is in, man, I say grab that orange and squeeze it till all the juice is out.
Hey, Chael, big fan from Bahrain. My question to you is about Jon Jones. I think it's only a matter of time before he either moves up to heavyweight or moves down to middleweight and face whoever the champion is. Now, if you were Jon and considering his weight and how much he walks around at, which way would you go?
All right, I gotta tell you, and Jon may be pressured to do just that. I don't believe that he can make middleweight, and I don't think we should ask that of him, right? When you got a bigger guy who's basically undefeated and a champ, for him to go down is a pretty rare thing. I don't know that we need to ask that of him. For him to go up to heavyweight, though, that's a little bit tough to ask too. Look, this champ thing is very real. And likely if Jon doesn't do the champ or try to, it will affect him in the long term as people look back and remember. I get all of that. you do need to understand if you're being fair to Jon. Jon's the perfect sized light heavyweight. He just is. He walks around right about 220, maybe even a little bit south of that 219. This is walking around. Now all of a sudden he goes into camp, he starts working a little harder, he stays out of the bars a little bit more. All of a sudden he's 215. I mean, he's 10 pounds away. To put that in perspective for you, why that may sound like a lot of weight, a guy like Jon Jones could lose 10 pounds, cut 10 pounds. That would take roughly 90 minutes if he was in a hurry. If he wanted to take a snail's pace, he could definitely do that in 2 hours. So all of a sudden, you're talking about a guy that doesn't have to lose any weight, just get up a little bit early on the day of weigh-ins and go get 2 hours in. He's a perfect size light heavyweight, and I do think putting some of these pressures on him, yes, we want to see it. But if we're real fair with each other, we want to see it because we want to see him get beat. That's the truth. We have a belief that Adesanya will kick his ass, so we want him to go down there. We have a belief that Miocic will kick his ass, so we try to send him up there. The real truth of trying to get Jon to fall for the champ thing and switch weight classes is because somebody doesn't like him and they want to get him beat. I don't have a problem with that. That's the fight game, but if we're going to call it out, let's call it fair.